Welcome everyone, Christine here on Serious Gaming with a discussion about leveling in World of Warcraft The Burning Crusade and my personal expectations for what will happen when Classic Burning Crusade comes out, when Blizzard decides to release it. When would that be? Well, I've talked about this in previous videos, but my personal thinking would be late August 2021, September potentially, around that mark. Now, they could release it earlier, but given the release schedule that they've got in current Classic, the time it will take between AQ and NAX, the time it will take between NAX and BC, and other issues as well. You have the pandemic, and that certainly affected the entire gaming industry. It's certainly delayed plenty of titles, as well as other issues that are happening right now. It would be very surprising for me if Blizzard released it earlier. But if they did decide to do it earlier, it's not like they can flip a switch. Oh, we just go from vanilla to Burn Crusade. It's more complicated than that. There's many differences. But if they do decide to make it earlier, I'd say the earliest would be spring next year. That's what I think. I don't think they do that. They certainly wouldn't do it in, say, late June or July. Doing it in July would be catastrophic for a variety of reasons. We've already seen in Classic how many people throughout summer, even in the middle of a pandemic, are just not playing as much. Many guilds have had issues with their rosters, with attendance, and this is on Classic. This is also on private servers. It always happens. Summer is a bad time. In fact, it is a bit surprising that Blizzard decided to release AQ, for instance, at the end of July, because that's going to create issues. But they haven't really released AQ. They've released the event, opening the gates, different thing, right? But anyway, that's a discussion I could go into more depth into in a separate video. Regarding leveling, this server where I'm recording the footage on is a server that came out a couple of days ago. It's 2x experienced from 1 to 58. Now, I'm not going to talk about vanilla leveling because I think that's been covered in plenty of videos, the paths to leveling, the optimal ways to level, discussions, differences between private server leveling and vanilla and classic leveling. There have been many discussions. What's important though is on this particular server with 2x experience and with better spawn rates, quest drops, all that kind of stuff, it incentivizes questing versus doing dungeons, which is obviously one of the primary methods of leveling that we used, especially early on when Classic came on. Like if you wanted to be 60 within the first week, you would be doing a metric ton of dungeons, and it would work very well. Like you would spend an entire day in Scarlet Monastery, you'd spend an entire day in Zul'Farrak, and you'd gain plenty of levels. That hasn't been the case on this server. Part of it's scripting, part of it is the experience bonus, part of it is quest drops, all that kind of stuff. But suffice to say that there are differences between leveling and vanilla content here and how it has been in Classic. But what about Burn Crusade? How would things stand when it comes to that? What kind of differences should we expect? Well, one thing is like professions. Like if you have 1x, which is obviously what Blizzard would go for on a server. If you had 1x and if you had everything fresh, you would see more people with more professions than in this particular case. Like because people have leveled faster, it means they haven't focused on professions as much because let's face it, it can be very annoying, and when you're leveling faster, you have a choice. Do I level or do I get professions? You know, do I slow down and get professions? Many people have decided, oh, let's level as quickly as possible. That, by the way, isn't necessarily the wisest idea. But anyway, with regards to Burning Crusade content, my perspective has been, and I stand by this view, when it comes to Outland, you don't want to just get to 58 and rush through the Dark Portal. That's a bad idea on multiple levels, especially when you're thinking about leveling on Blizzard servers, on Classic servers. The reason is you will do a lot of quests. You won't actually have enough quests, and you might end up doing pretty much all of the zones to get to 70, especially if you have to skip quests because you just flat out can't do them because there's too many people. Imagine tens of thousands of people going through the Dark Portal and leveling in this area. It would be a nightmare. And then Zangarmarsh, then Terracar, then the Grand. Every step of the way, it would be an absolute nightmare. So you want to go into Outland as high a level as possible. What does that mean? Well, one of the things I personally did here, and it's 1x past 58, I got 58 outside of the Plague Lands, then I did the Plague Lands at 58, Western Plaguelands in particular did all of that. And the Plaguelands themselves offered over, the Western Plaguelands themselves offered over 1 level of experience. If I had done the Eastern Plaguelands, and I could have, I just decided not to, I was about halfway past the point of 59 by the time I decided, you know what, I've had enough, and I moved into Outland. If I had done the entirety of the Plaguelands, Eastern Plaguelands included, I would have been over 60. And the reason that matters is that you can have quite a few quests, be it the Nephal's Balai quests, if you're Horde, the Tyrian Fortune quests, that do give you quite a bit of experience and aren't too much of a pain to actually do. One idea is you could go to Outland, do, say, for instance, the first quest in Hellfire Peninsula, which has you dealing with some imps and infernals and a dreadlord outside of Honorhold and Fralmar respectively, get the weapon and go back to the Eastern Kingdoms, and then with that weapon do the Outland do the Plaguelands content, that is, and you would be able to level faster for it. You would have an easier time, certainly. That's one of the things to know. And then, of course, actually do the Outland content. Speaking about leveling in Outland, let's first talk about dungeon grinding. You have Hellfire Ramparts and Blood Furnace that are available from 60 plus. And I wouldn't recommend doing either of them below level 60. That's one other thing as to why you shouldn't just go waltz into Outland at 58. Now, you can do Ramparts as 58, 59 once you've done some quests, gotten some quest rewards. That's not too much of a problem. But Blood Furnace with, say, a full group of level 58s, 59s, that's not a good idea. You might actually just get blocked on the second boss. But how much experience would you gain? Well, I've done plenty of dungeons on this particular character, and it's about 20,000 plus experience for Ramparts at a proper level, so 60 plus, and about 30,000 plus for Blood Furnace. So that's something to be aware of per run. Now, how fast are these runs? Well, it depends obviously on the group. It can be 20 minutes to 30 minutes. I'd say on average it's been around 30 minutes in the pugs I've done for Ramparts, and for over 30 minutes for Blood Furnace. But if you had a decent enough group that, you know, people would get used to one another and you were running the same dungeon over and over again, and you actually had a good group set up, you could do Ramparts in, like, say, 20 minutes. 20 minutes for 20,000 experience, maybe even faster, obviously, if you had a really good group, people in the same guild, people that coordinate, people on Discord, all that, you would do it even faster. I would find it unlikely to do it, for most groups, to do it faster than 20 minutes. So 20 minutes per run, 20,000 experience, that's about 60,000. Let's say you were able to reach the limit. Some people would manage that, of course. Some groups, some spell cleave groups in particular, or cleave groups in general, would be able to manage that. So let's say you reach the limit. So 5 dungeons per hour, 20,000. So you're looking at anywhere between 60,000 experience to 100,000 experience in really good groups. That's how much Hellfire Ramparts would give you. Blood Furnace is trickier because just due to the way that it's designed as a dungeon, it's difficult to do it faster than a certain point. So you would be unlikely to get more than 100,000, say, for instance, in Blood Furnace, more than, say, 3 runs per hour. So we're looking at around 100,000 per hour, at best, right? In some of the best case scenarios for these dungeons. Now, for a level, you require hundreds of thousands of experience points, 500,000, 600,000, so on and so forth. And so you're looking at a situation where realistically, in the best case scenario, you're looking at anywhere between 6 to 10 hours per level. That's not really great, right? That's not the best leveling rate, and it certainly could be a lot better. And the problem also is that even once you're, say, 62, it's not like you have a lot of other dungeons. Like, once you're 62, it doesn't make much sense to do Ramparts or Blood Furnace. Oh, but we can move to Slave Pens. Sure, you can move to Slave Pens, but even that's going to be limited. I'd say the real problem is not necessarily with the Hellfire Citadel dungeons or the Coilfang dungeons. It's really with the Auchindoun dungeons. So dungeon leveling is going to be limited to some extent. It's going to be slower in comparison to, say, how dungeon leveling was in vanilla versus how questing was in vanilla. But what about questing? How much do you get from doing quests? Well, there are obviously a lot of quests that you can do in Burning Crusade and Hellfire in Hellfire Peninsula in every zone, dozens upon dozens of quests. Each of these quests gives at least 10,000 experience. More obviously as you get to the higher level quests, but 10,000, let's say 10,000 for the early quests per quest, right? That means you need to do dozens of quests in order to gain a single level. Now here is where the problem really begins when it comes to questing in particular. There are many quests in Hellfire Peninsula in particular, less so in Zangarmarsh or Terrakar, but really in Hellfire, and it's really by far and away the worst zone when it comes to this. There are many quests that are actually an absolute nightmare to do. Like, right from the start, as you enter Hellfire Peninsula, you're confronted with a quest from Honorhold and from Falmar to collect Bone Chewer blood. Now, this is not a single quest. It's a quest that's part of a chain that overall would give you easily over 100,000 experience if you were to do it in its entirety, and some important rewards. I'm actually on this chain. I'm on the Burden of Soul, which requires me to get 20 Shattered Hands souls. So you start collecting Bone Chewer blood. Now, the problem with that, like from the very start, you need to collect 12 bloods. The mobs that this blood drops from is from this area here, if you're Horde, on the other side for Alliance. There's maybe a couple dozen mobs in total, a few dozen mobs in total in these areas. You need 12 blood, it doesn't have a 100% drop chance, and every single person needs to do it individually. Don't have shared quest drops. Everyone wants to do it. It's literally one of the very first quests that you get as you enter the Hellfire Peninsula, and it's a bloody nightmare. But on top of that, the follow-up to that has you coming here in Zefkar and getting more blood, and that becomes an even bigger challenge. And then there's other quests, like you have to destroy certain Legion forces as these camps north of Fralmar, which again is an issue because not enough mobs and too much competition. Then there's a quest here, or free quest here in Void Ridge, which I'm on the final quest to, like, go kill Galaxus, for instance, get his soul shard. So there's plenty of quests in Hellfire that are like that. It's like, and there's quest chains that give a lot of experience. That skipping means you're going to be slower, and this is where the problem really starts kicking in. You have a choice. You can either deal with exceptionally frustrating, excruciatingly difficult to do quests, not difficult in the sense that the mobs are difficult to do because not enough mobs, not enough drops, and you need to just fight so many people, and there's so many people, thousands, tens of thousands potentially in certain servers that are going to be doing the same thing. That's going to be a major issue, as you can imagine, and it's on multiple steps of the way. There's many quests like this. You can skip them, like you can stomach that and you'll be slower for it, or you can skip them. Now, the problem with skipping them, and this is where the real issue kicks in, the problem with skipping them is you're missing out on a lot of experience. Like if you were just to skip a lot of the frustrating quests, you probably would be looking at, I don't know, like a few dozen quests in total. That's potentially hundreds of thousands of experience points. You would struggle to actually reach 62, especially if you had started at 58. You would struggle to do that if you were to skip a lot of these quests, and that creates an issue where you're trying to enter Zangarmarsh, and you're trying to move on. And one of the problems with Burning Crusade leveling is that quests are very tightly locked beyond very strict level requirements. So if you're trying to do Zangarmarsh and not being 62, that's going to be a problem for you, right? And then you just start a roller coaster, and it gets worse and worse the more quests you skip, and you certainly would skip some frustrating quests in Zangarmarsh, especially if there was so much competition. The more quests you skip, the further behind you are, and you might end up having to do a lot of Netherstorm and Shadow Moon Valley. Now, what's the problem with that? Well, the problem with doing that is gold. If Classic has taught us anything, is that farming the open world level is going to be next to impossible. Now, on the server, it's actually not too bad. Like, many people that are ahead of the curve, like ahead of the Zerg, have been really able to take advantage of that. They've either leveled professions or they've farmed primals here at the Throne of Elements. They've farmed a lot of primals, but that certainly wouldn't apply on Classic, since plenty of people would rush to level, plenty of people would go crazy. And in fact, like, one of the things Classic has shown is people are willing to take it to a far more extreme level in Classic, regardless of any discussion of difficulty, than they ever have been on private servers. They take it far more seriously, they take it to a far more extreme level. For Christ's sake, there are pugs, let's be clear on this, not guilds, pugs that mandate you have full world buffs, right, in order to do MCM Blackwing raids that people sneeze at how easy they are, and yet still people ask that, demand that even in order to do them. Not necessarily many of them, but still pugs. Whereas guilds on private servers, many of them in fact wouldn't necessarily do that for every raid, and would do them within a reasonable time frame. It is pretty crazy how extreme things have gotten Classic, and it's not just on raiding perspective, it's on leveling perspective, it's on a gold farming perspective. It's far more extreme. So if you level and you do a lot of Netherstorm Shadow Valley, then you're limiting yourself to how much gold you can get, because ideally what you'd want to do is to do these zones at 70, because you're looking at 2,000 gold or over 2,000 gold if you do those quests at 70 instead of doing them while leveling. It's also a better experience, a faster experience than trying to do them while being under leveled, and that's an issue. But of course, dungeons themselves may not be as fast as people would want. My view would be combination of doing dungeons and doing quests. This is what I've personally done. It's not necessarily about being the fastest, it's about being intelligent about it. Now, of course, there are people in the top guilds, right? They're just going to do anything that they can to rush to 70 as quickly as possible. But even for them, that might not be the best decision unless they have a huge hoard of gold already stocked up. Because guess what? The world first race in Burning Crusade is not going to be about, who gets to level 70 faster. I mean, for Karazhan, for Macfardan, for Gruul, absolutely. For Kael'thas and Vosh, not necessarily. It's about which guild makes the smartest decisions. That's what it's really going to come down to. So yeah, that's all I had to really say on this. It might give people some ideas of what they can expect. Like, plenty of quests are annoying, plenty of quests are frustrating, but dungeon experience isn't necessarily what it's cracked up to be. My personal view is when Burning Crusade comes out on Classic, there's many people that are likely just going to head into Hellfire and not leave. As horrible as the experience might be for plenty of people, it's still going to be better than trying to do many of the quests in Hellfire. But they're likely also going to do certain quests. I mean, think of it. You have a quest chain here in Fralmar or Honorhold. Then you have another one regarding the demons. Then you have another one regarding, like, as Horde, you have a goblin here. He offers a quest chain that's also frustrating. Then you have some quests here, for instance, with the Haleshi. And on it goes. Like, many quest chains are like this. It's not just one or two. It's a lot of the quests in Hellfire in particular are exceptionally frustrating. So it's going to be a nightmare all the same. Cosine signing out. Don't forget to subscribe, like, and enable notifications, and stay tuned for more.